Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to my new video. So before I start, I'm going to talk about the main stories for the day. I'm going to start with President Trump's latest outburst, in which he said that the Saudi Crown Prince is basically kissing his ass. That was his own words. And he also said that he loves hanging around with losers because that makes him feel good. So that was a basically insult of everybody that hangs around with Trump. Basically, Trump is calling them a loser. It's quite funny. Trump is also hinting at a bigger war after Iran. And you can see here in his statement, he said, if the big one ever happened, I guarantee you they wouldn't be there. So what does it mean by the big one? And I'll explain to you very soon. This is more about him saying that he hangs around with losers, and you can see him hanging around with some of the losers there. I'm going to be talking about China's industry of fakes and how it's costing the United States and Israel billions and billions of dollars. I'm going to talk about Lebanon, which I didn't really cover in my earlier videos. I'm going to talk a bit more about Lebanon, what's happening there, and a bit more about Kharg Island as well. And if I get any time, I'll talk about the Philippines. It seems like they're still causing trouble in the South China Sea. And why? What is the point when they're literally running out of oil? Anyway, I'm going to start with the main story. And before I start, guys, don't forget to like and share and comment. Really helps algorithm if you watch the video from start to end. And also, if you can watch my other channel and bring up the watch time, some of the old videos, I'd really appreciate it. The channel link is in my description. So without further ado, let's start with the show. So Trump again, there's never a dull moment with President Trump. Every single day he seems to say something horrific, causing a nationwide issue or an international incident. And yesterday he basically said that the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia is kissing his ass. That was his own words. He says, he is kissing my ass. He better be nice to me. He gotta be nice to me. Or, along those lines. And the whole of Twitter basically exploded. And Prince Salman, MBS, he's known as. He is basically trended number one in Twitter. Basically, everybody was talking about him and tweeting about him. And there's tweets all over Twitter of him kissing President Trump's ass. And it must be absolutely humiliating, guys. Absolutely humiliating for a Muslim world leader to be kissing a president's ass, United States, ass basically. And I cannot believe how humiliating, the Muslim world has become, especially these leaders. I'm not saying all Muslims, by the way. I'm just talking about these Gulf leaders. I have a lot of respect for Muslims, so I'm not bashing Muslims or anything like that. I'm just bashing these spineless cowards who basically are leading the GCC countries. That includes Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Qatar, UAE. Those are the main ones, and there are others as well, but I think let's just stick for these for now. And I cannot believe how these crown princes of these rich Arab countries are just kissing American ass like that. The great words of Lavrov said that these Gulf Arabs are more scared of Trump than they are of their God. Once upon a time, the Muslim Empire, or shall I say maybe the Persian Empire at the time, and there were other Muslim empires as well, Ottoman Empire and other empires as well. One of the reasons they were so feared is because they were not scared of death. They were fearless. Very similar to the warriors we have right now, like in Yemen, like in Hezbollah, even Hamas, even fearless soldiers who are not scared of death. And you have these cowards who are absolutely scared of Trump, scared of Israel, than they are of their own God. And in the Muslim religion, it clearly says that every single Muslim should not be scared of any man. The only person they need to be scared of is their God, which is Allah. That's the only thing that they should be scared of. They should not be scared of any man. They shouldn't be scared of anything or in life. And that's what the religion teaches you. These cowards are literally kissing an American white man's ass. Literally, guys. And why? Why are they doing it? Because Saudi Arabia has been pouring trillions and trillions of money into America. They are pouring trillions of money into America's defense. They're pouring trillions of money into America's bond market. They're pouring trillions of money into America's economy, stocks and shares, and they buy a lot of stocks and shares. This is one of the reasons why the the stocks are so high, because these Arabs keep pouring money into it. This is why the S&P 500 grows year by year. And I remember the times when the Gulf Arabs used to have a bit of a spine. And those of you who are old enough will remember the 1972 or 1973 oil embargo that the Gulf states did, and they caused a huge world recession. They caused huge economic issues to the world because they basically stopped providing oil to the world. And this was because Israel was committing mass genocide in Palestine. And the Gulf Arabs, they all protested against it. And the Gulf leader at the time, who was a Saudi Arabian leader at the time, King Faisal, he got assassinated, probably by Mossad, by Israel. And that was a time when the Gulf Arabs and Arab states had some balls to stand up to the West. So what's happened since then? They have become complete servants of the West, guys, completely servants. It's absolutely humiliating. For any Muslim to look at what's happening in Saudi Arabia and see how humiliating these leaders are, is humiliating for a Muslim. As a Muslim, you should be proud to you know, be fearless, to be fighting and standing up for humanity, like what's happening in Palestine and stuff. These Gulf countries have done nothing, absolutely nothing. They watch their own brothers and sisters be genocided in live stream. Because every day, you would see images of women and children being bombed and killed. And what did these Gulf states do? Nothing, guys. Absolutely nothing. Now they are allowing their own airspace. They are allowing American bases to stage attacks to another Muslim country, which is Iran. Absolutely disgusting, guys. If all the Arab states stuck together, did not allow any American bases in their lands, did not allow any use of American kind of use of their airspace, American planes would not be able to fly around and start doing bombing raids. They cannot do it. And plus, these Gulf countries literally pay for America's military industrial complex. Billions and hundreds of billions of money goes into the military industrial complex. And for what? They buy useless weapons that they can't even defend themselves with. They rely on American defense. If you're basically allowing America to defend you, you basically have no sovereignty as a country. You might as well just become slaves. And that's what they are, guys. No sovereignty whatsoever. These Gulf Arabs should be ashamed of themselves. Yeah, I'm blaming the Gulf Arab leaders, but a lot of the blame has to go onto the Gulf Arabs who actually live in those countries as well. Because if your leader is this corrupt, then you should be going out in the streets and protesting and getting rid of these leaders and putting somebody who is at least, have some respect, basically. That's what you should be doing. But no, these Arabs, they like to do these color revolutions organized by the CIA, organized by Mossad. They fall for these Mossad tricks and CIA tricks. Like, there's been quite a few like CIA, Mossad based color revolutions lately of the last few years. There's one in Bangladesh, one in Nepal. There was obviously one in Egypt not long ago. And obviously in Iran, it happened as well. In Iran, it happened in Syria. So you see, these Gulf Arabs are so low IQ. They fall for these cheap tricks by the CIA, and they put these puppets in place. While they should be doing the opposite. They should be kicking out the puppets and putting somebody sovereign in place. That's what they should be doing. Yeah, it's absolutely crazy how these Gulf Arabs have become over the years, guys. They have become so weak and pathetic and absolutely it's humiliating to watch. It's absolutely humiliating to watch, guys. It's become so bad that even China is seeing this as well. And remember that video I showed you yesterday with which was done with AI, and you had a couple of puppets. You had the Japanese prime minister, but then you also had a couple of Arabs on either side of her. Obviously, one was, supposed to be MBS, and the other one was probably the UAE leader. China knows the Gulf states are complete puppets of the West. And China knows that one day, if there was a war with China and America, America will tell these Gulf countries stop supplying oil to China, and these Gulf countries will do it because they are such puppets. That's why China doesn't trust these Gulf countries fully. That's why China loves countries who are sovereign, countries like Iran. And this is why China is helping Iran, because they know when it comes to a major war, puppets are the ones, puppets of the United States are the ones that China cannot rely on, because these puppets will always listen to the Americans. So that's the problem, guys. And there's not many sovereign countries left in the world. I mean, the only sovereign countries left in the world, they had to fight for their sovereignties. They had to fight for their sovereignty. And it took a lot of pain, it took a lot of blood, it took a lot of hardship. Like China went through 100-year humiliation to become the country they are today. The country they are today is a lot more respected. You can see the lives of every single Chinese is so much improved year on year. And they've worked so hard. China's worked so hard to become who they are today. And it took a lot of hard work, took a lot of blood and treasure and sweat. 100 years of humiliation China had to suffer with countries doing genocide on them, like the Japanese. When they did obviously I can't say it, but you guys know what they did, especially in Nanjing. And then they fought these bloody wars in Korea, in Vietnam, and that was a time when China was poor. China had no weapons, no money, and they still fought these wars against all odds. When at the time American Empire was the biggest and best empire, ever in the history of humanity, with advanced weapons and planes and bombs, nuclear weapons, you name it. They were so advanced, and China was basically fighting them without any of that. Same with Vietnam. Vietnam fought the Americans, and now they've become sovereign, and even Vietnam's improving as well. If you guys look at Vietnam, it's improved so much, and they're sovereign. They're not controlled by United States. They do their own thing. And now Iran is fighting for their sovereignty. Iran is another one of those few countries in the world who are fully sovereign. They don't have any American bases in there, and America doesn't control their foreign policy. They don't tell Iran what to do. They don't tell Iran who they can sell the oil to. They don't have to open up Iran's economy to American businesses. And this is why Iran is sanctioned. They they are heavily sanctioned, just like Russia and just like China. People don't realize this, but China actually has been heavily sanctioned for 50 or 80 years. Since the Korean War, China was heavily sanctioned, and from the 1980s, I don't know if you guys remember, but there was a arms embargo against China, which means no country was allowed to sell any arms to China. And this was extended to any source of technology. No technology was allowed to be sold to China, which was advanced technology. And even China was banned from the International Space Station. In the International Space Station, even Russia was allowed in, but every country was allowed in except China. So these sanctions, these tariffs, sanctions, and all these restrictions that happen to a country, sometimes it can destroy a country, but other times, if you work hard enough, it can work for your benefit. So because of all these sanctions and embargoes, China had to develop their own industry. They had to develop their own nuclear weapons. You know, Russia at the time, they didn't help them. They backstabbed China a few times. I should say the Soviet Union, to be honest. But so what happened was, Stalin and Chairman Mao didn't really get along that well, and the Soviet Union was supposed to help China develop their nuclear weapons, but they backed down and they cancelled the agreement, and they didn't basically go along with the agreement. So China had to develop their own nuclear weapons. And I think China realized that you know they were on their own, because the Soviets actually backstabbed China a few times. For example, in the Korean War, they expected the Soviet Unions to help China more, give them more weapons, give them more air cover, and the Soviet Unions were supposed to come in and help China and North Korea, but they did very, very minimal, guys, absolutely minimal. And yeah, so they let China down quite a lot throughout its history. And China realized they were on their own. Yeah, at the time they were being sanctioned by the West, and they were being backstabbed by the Soviet Union. Then the Soviet Union took a huge piece of land from China, which was part of an unequal treaty, which was Manchuria. And this was all part of the 100-year humiliation, guys. And then China realized, they really don't have any friends in this world. They have to work hard themselves and develop all of their industries themselves. That was the goal from the 1950s. So some of you might say that, oh, by the way, it wasn't China. It was basically they joined the World Trade Organization, and after that, China economy boomed. Well, why did they join the why did they join the World Trade Organization? Who let them in? You guys have to realize The reason they were added to the World Trade Organization, right, was because of China's strength. They beat America in the Korean War. They beat America in the Vietnam War. And as part of the Vietnam War negotiations, America said China would be allowed back into the world economy if they stopped fighting in Vietnam, if they stopped fighting against the Americans. And that was part of the peace agreement. And they said they will allow China to join the World Trade Organization in a few years. They will basically help China develop and and you obviously share technology and things like that. And they would also they said they would also give back the island of Taiwan to China. They basically agreed on the one China principle. So there was a lot of negotiations taking place, and a lot of things that happened after that was because of China fighting against USA and winning against the USA in Korea, in Vietnam, and America knew that it's much better to have China as an ally than an enemy. And this is what happens when you fight America and you win. America respects you. And if America respects you, they'd rather have you on their side as opposed to being their enemy. And this is why if Iran wins this war against America, you will see America change their attitude towards Iran. They will have a lot more respect for Iran, and they will start becoming friends with Iran. They will release all the sanctions, and that relationship will change drastically. Same thing happened with China and America. And then obviously China joined the World Trade Organization, and one thing led to another. And even then, China never ever, you know, China never ever kind of gave up on their belief that they will always have to stand up on their own. Ever since the 1950s, they realized they have to be able to do all of the technology by themselves. They cannot rely on anyone, not even the West. And then the West banned China from the space agency and International Space Station, and China started developing its own space station. And if you guys remember, you know, there was something called the first Taiwan crisis, second Taiwan crisis, and the third Taiwan crisis. And there was nearly a war that started because the people of Taiwan were going more towards independence. So China wasn't happy. And there was one time when China threw a couple of missiles as a warning shot towards Taiwan, but obviously not into the island, but they wanted to kind of send some warning shots, just hit the waters outside of Taiwan, just to kind of show that they were serious. So what happened was America basically shut down the GPS, and these missiles just dropped and fell into the sea. And China realized that they cannot rely on American GPS for their missiles because America can shut down the GPS, and these missiles would be useless. So this is why China developed the Beidou system. And this Beidou system has been a game changer, not only for China, but for the world. Iran is now using these Beidou systems for their own hypersonic missiles targeting American bases and Israeli bases. If they use GPS, you can guarantee that these missiles would always miss their targets, or they would just blow up halfway in the air, or they would just be duds and just start falling into the ground. So it's been a major game changer, this Beidou satellite system. But this is just one of the technologies China had to develop by themselves. Obviously, now they're focusing on semiconductors. For every single sector, they've been making their own. They've been making their own tunnel boring systems because Japan wouldn't sell them the latest, biggest tunnel boring system. So China developed its own. China had to develop literally everything by themselves because they cannot rely on the West. And when Trump was elected in his first term and he started a trade war against China, that basically was another, kick in the teeth to the Chinese because what Trump did was he banned Huawei. He tried to destroy Huawei. He tried to destroy all the Chinese companies. He wouldn't let them buy any advanced semiconductors. He wouldn't let them buy any advanced semiconductor making machines. The He really came down hard on China. He stopped, supplying parts for China's own jet. Obviously China was developing its own planes, so even Trump started, stopping those parts going into China. So China had to redesign all of the parts in the planes now. And now with the latest jets that China's going to be releasing, it's going to be mainly homegrown. While before Trump's first term, he was about 70-80%, which was foreign made. But now nearly 80-90% of that plane is going to be homegrown. Obviously, some of the parts are still foreign made because some foreign companies are still selling to China, but over time they are slowly being replaced by local Chinese companies. So you see, guys, being sovereign brings a lot of advantages, and it's brought a lot of advantages to China, and it has also brought a lot of advantages to Iran as well. I mean, I think all of the West is shocked, absolutely shocked by Iran's capabilities with all these missiles and drones, their intelligence, their satellites. Their how they're fighting with a major superpower like United States, plus a major military like Israel, and they're fighting both of them at the same time. How many European countries do you know that can fight toe to toe with America and Israel at the same time? Any European country would probably give up within a day or two. They will surrender. But Iran is not surrendering. Yeah, they might be getting help from China and Russia, but that's not the point. At the end of the day, you as a country, you need to fight first. You know, yeah, China and Russia can help you, but you still need to fight as a country. I mean, look at Venezuela. China and Russia gave Venezuela a lot of support, but Venezuela gave up without a fight. Literally, America didn't even fire one single shot or bullet, or they didn't lose a single life, and Venezuela basically gave up the country. So, as a country, you have to fight first, and you have to build up that respect. That you are not an easy country to invade. That your people will not allow slavery. They will fight for sovereignty. Yeah, as a bare minimum, you have to do that. So this picture basically, again, it shows Trump humiliating all of his friends, everyone that hangs around with Trump. Trump basically says that I love to hang around with losers because it makes me feel better. And the reason he said that was because somebody in the audience asked him a question. They asked him, why did you ask Pakistan to help negotiate terms with Iran and USA? And instead of saying nice things about Pakistan, that was his answer. He says, I like to hang around with losers because it makes me feel better. That was his answer. So it's basically another dig at Pakistan, and he's basically calling them losers. So not only did he humiliate Saudi Arabia, he's also humiliating Pakistan as well in the same breath. But one thing he did say is not many people have actually picked up on this, but I picked up on it. So he was bashing NATO as well. And one of his statements, he said, if the big one ever happened, I guarantee you they wouldn't be there. We will learn from that. Remember what I say. They will make a big mistake. They were not there. So what does it mean if the big one ever happened? I guarantee you they wouldn't be there. So I think he's talking about China, guys. He's not talking about World War III because If you're talking about World War III, you are talking about every single country being involved, especially NATO. NATO would be fighting on the American side. They would be fighting probably Russia or, Belarus and, other countries. Even they might even join in to fight in the Middle East. Who knows? Well, he's talking about China. He says if the big one ever happened. So the big one ever happened. Obviously Trump is basically talking about America, and he says they wouldn't be there. We will learn from that. So he's talking about a war, a big war that America's going to have, and it's most likely with China, and he wants NATO to be there. So Trump is basically saying that if there is a big major war with China, he cannot rely on NATO to be on the American side. So that's what he's trying to say. He says, if we go to war with China, we have to go to war with China with no allies. We have to be ready to go to war with China with no allies. And it does look like that because I think you can see from this Iran war, America is losing its allies everywhere. No country wants to help America. None of the Europeans want to help America, apart from the British. I think the British are helping, even though Keir Starmer is denying it. But you can see the British, helping. They're providing airspace. They're providing bases, probably intelligence, and yeah, the British will always be there on the American side. But I think what Trump is looking for is allies to fight their big wars for them, especially China. I think Japan will probably join America. I think Australia will because they have no choice. Philippines will be dragged in. But I think South Korea, they might say no. I think South Korea do have some balls. Depends on who the president is at the time. But the current president definitely would say no to America. But we'll see, guys. We'll see what happens. So China has been sending lots of fake stuff for Americans to blow up. I don't know if you guys have seen the video. China produces lots of fake tanks and planes and artillery and anti-aircraft guns, and they're all fake. They're basically inflatable, and they look so real, guys. You cannot believe it. They look so real. They have tanks with movable turrets and anti-aircraft guns with movable radars and things like that. It's amazing how real they look, and they only cost maybe a couple of thousand or maybe $1,000 each, maybe maybe less. Who knows? But I think the top of the range ones, the ones that look absolutely real, like the real thing, they cost at least 1,000 or maybe a couple of thousand. Compared to these bombs must be costing hell of a lot of money. Like you got to look at the cost of the airplane flying. So you got to add that to the cost. Then you got to drop the bombs, and each bomb probably costs maybe a million or just over a million. I don't know, guys. Obviously, it depends on the bomb, obviously. And so, in terms of the war economy, even if America blows up these fakes, they are still losing because they are still losing in the economics of war. Because when you have a $1,000 or $2,000 target being blown up by $1 million missile, who's winning at the end of the day? And if there are you know, if there are, I mean, you can see from this article, there's 900,000 inflatable decoys, 900,000 of them all around Iran. And if America spends all of their money dropping all of these bombs on these useless inflatable decoys, then who wins end of the day? And if this is a war of attrition, Iran is going to win in the long term because they're the ones that will save the most money, and America is going to be the one that's spending the most money. Unfortunately, yeah, America is blowing up all of these decoys, but unfortunately, they're also blowing up lots of infrastructure as well. And I think America knows there's a lot of decoys on the floor. So what they're doing now is they're blowing up schools, hospitals, water treatment plants. I think yesterday they blew up some power plants, even though Trump said that there's going to be a 10-day extension. But you cannot listen to Trump. You cannot even believe Trump. I don't think he has any control over Israel, by the way. Really doesn't matter what Trump says. Trump says, I'm going to give Iran 10 days, otherwise I'm going to blow up its biggest power plant. Well, guess what? Israel doesn't give them 10 days. Israel does what he wants. And Israel basically blew up Iran's power plant yesterday. Today they blew up the water treatment plant. And Iran is obviously going to react. They're going to start blowing up the Gulf countries' power plants and water treatment plants in return, and even in Israel, because they said they would. And yes, it's just escalating beyond Trump's control. And if this keeps escalating, not only Iran will suffer, but the Gulf countries will suffer, and Israel will suffer. And it's going to be harder and harder to make peace. The more damage that's caused, the more harder it is going to be to basically make peace, because each of these countries will want compensation for all the damage that's caused. And this compensation is getting higher and higher and higher. So it's going to be harder and harder to make a deal. So I want to show you this video, guys. I mean, can you guess where this video is, by the way? This is basically South Lebanon. And look how beautiful South Lebanon is. It's got lots of green. It's got water. It's got beautiful landscapes. It's got fresh vegetation, lakes, mountains, lots of access to, water. Look how beautiful it is. And this is why Israel wants South Lebanon. Because obviously you have Israel, basically wants its Greater Israel project. And they see South Lebanon as absolutely beautiful. It's green. It's not destroyed. And that's what they want. They want control over South Lebanon. And this is why they're trying to invade. Unfortunately for them, Hezbollah is fighting them. And over the last week or so, according to Hezbollah, and I think according to some Western sources, there's been over 100, estimated 100 Merkava tanks have been destroyed with footage like this, with drones. And I think in the Ukraine-Russian war, it has shown that, tanks are pretty much useless against drones. One drone can take out, one drone, probably estimate a drone costs 10 to 50,000, depending on the type of drone. But a Merkava tank, costs at least 2-3 million, maybe 5 million. So you can see the odds. If one or two drones can take out a tank, in terms of the war economy, you will run out of tanks faster than you will run out of drones. So it's going to be very, very difficult for Israel to invade South Lebanon because of Hezbollah. And Hezbollah has been very quiet over the last few months, and they've been rearming, obviously. They've been taking lots of lessons from Iran as well, because these drones, these are probably Iranian drones, or Iran has probably shared the technology with them. And Israel is not prepared for it. So they're fighting on all these fronts. They're fighting against Hezbollah, they're fighting against Iran, they're still fighting against Hamas. And now Yemen has joined the war as well. So somebody in Israel released a statement yesterday in Haaretz saying, if this continues, the IDF will collapse. And if they're going to collapse because, first of all, they're running out of troops because so many are being killed or injured. And many of them don't want to fight. And secondly, they're running out of money because they are stretched in so many different ways. And they just cannot support it because they're spending so much money. They're losing so much lives. They're losing so much equipment like these tanks. They just cannot keep fighting on all these fronts. And usually America comes to their rescue and gives them money. But right now, America cannot give them money. I mean, you just have to look at the stock market. Stock market is starting to fall. The bond market is going up. The yields have been going up. Um, the cost of the war is going up on a daily basis. So America needs this money to pay for its own war. They haven't got the money to give to Israel. They got to pay for their own war. And America is absolutely broke. They're having to take money and items from other countries. I heard a report today that they were supposed to give tomahawks to Switzerland, and they took the money from Switzerland, but they decided not to give them tomahawks because they need the tomahawks. And they also took the money out of the F-35 program they were supposed to give to Switzerland. So they're basically stealing money from their allies. They're stealing, the THAAD missile systems from Asia and putting them into Middle East. And I heard that one of the Korean THAAD missiles they stole from Korea, South Korea, they put into Jordan, and that got destroyed immediately within like a day. That got destroyed. So already, you know, America is absolutely pushed. They haven't got the money or the bandwidth to support Israel or the IDF. So the longer this war goes on, obviously the more costs it's going to incur to America and to Israel. And I just don't think they can support it. Anyway, guys, I wanted to talk about Karg Island, but I think the video is running a bit long now, so I'm going to put it to the end and I'm going to save it for tomorrow. Anyway, take care for now, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.